Hi, my friends. Welcome to Inside the Minds of Authors. I'm DC Gomez, your host, and also an indie author. I'm thrilled you're joining me today for another fun interview with a passionate author. We're going to kick off this show with an exciting reading, so let's get started.
Hi, my name is Roxanne Bland. I'm the author of The Moreva of Astereth, and I am going to read a little bit from the book so that you can get a flavor of what it's about. It is a science fiction romance. Chapter 1. I could have you executed for this, Moreva Tehi, Astereth said. My Devi grandmother, the goddess of love, scowled at me from her golden throne in the massive great hall of her equally massive temple. Today, her long white hair had been woven into slender braids entwined with multicolored strands of tiny jewels. They sparkled in the incandescent light radiating from the ceiling and the bulbous wall-height fixtures. Her golden eyes burned with fury. Sitting on my heels, I bowed my head, not wanting to see her anger. I stared at the black and gold polished floor, trying to ignore the trickle of sweat snaking down my spine. My unbound hair, white like hers, hung over my face. Yes, most holy one, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You blaspheme by not celebrating Ora Namtar, the holiest rite of the gods. You are well aware that this was not Ora's sin, praising my role in creating Paris, but extolling all the deeds of the great pantheon and bringing this planet to life. Ora Namtar celebrates our creation of the Hakoi, and the worthiest, handpicked by me and my brothers and sisters, celebrated with us. Marduk asked me of your whereabouts. Your absence sorely disappointed him. I shuddered in fear and loathing. Marduk, lord of the skies, was Aster's twin brother and my grandson. I'd been scared of him since childhood and always made sure I was never alone with him. I hated the way he'd stare at me when no one was looking, licking his lips as if I were a juicy piece of meat just waiting to be devoured. I had been too young to participate in the last Ora Namtar and knew he would have been only too eager to get his hands on me during this one. Moreva Tehi, Astereth's hard tone brought me back to the moment. You are my acolyte. Your participation was not an option. By your absence, you did not share your body with us, your brother and sister Morevs, and our worthy Hakoi. You sullied the sacredness of Ora Namtar. What do you have to say for yourself? I can only offer my most abject apologies, most holy one. Your apologies are not accepted. Yes, most holy one. Where were you? I was in the laboratory working on a cure for red fever. Our 4-year cycle will end this summer, and thousands of Hakoi in the god cities and towns could die, so I know that, my grandmother snapped. But why did you miss Ora Namtar? Did you not hear the bells? Yes, most holy one. I heard them. I was about to lay aside my work when I noticed an anomaly in one of my Parion solutions, so I decided to take a minute to investigate. What I found, I just lost track of time. You lost track of time, she repeated, sounding incredulous. Do you expect me to believe that? Yes, most holy one, it is the truth. My head and heart began throbbing, my grandmother probing me for signs I had lied. But she wouldn't find any. Lying to her was pointless, and her punishment for lying was harsh. Swaying under the onslaught, I endured the pain without making a sound. After what seemed like forever, the throbbing ease leaving me sick and dizzy. Very well. I accept what you say is true. I still do not accept your apology. Yes, most holy one, I said, panting a little. A minute passed in uncomfortable silence. Uncomfortable for me, anyway. Another minute passed, and another. Is she finished with me? I prayed to be dismissed, but I wasn't. What do you have against my Hakoi, Moreva? I frowned. I don't understand, most holy one. I have watched you. You give them no respect. You heal them because you must, but you treat them like animals. Why is that? The trickle of sweat reached the small of my back and pooled there. But my work, Your work is a game between you and the red fever. It has nothing to do with my Hakoi. I didn't reply. It was true. Discovering the cure was a challenge I'd taken on because no one since the dawn of Paris had been able to find one. It was a war, me assaulting the virus's defenses and the virus fending off my attacks. Our war was my obsession and one I meant to win. And I didn't care about the Hakor. I despised them. They were docile enough. The Devi spawning and breeding program saw to that. But they were slow-witted, not unlike the Pirsu the temple raised from meat and hide. They stank of makira, the pungent cabbage that was their dietary staple. From what I'd seen traveling through Kara to Astaroths and the other temples of the other gods, all the Hokoi were stupid and smelly, and I wanted nothing to do with them. But I couldn't admit that she was right. I racked my brain trying to think of something that wasn't an outright lie. Then it came to me. Most Holy One, I treat your Hakoi the way I do because it is the hierarchy of being as the Devi created it. You taught us the great pantheon of 12 is supreme. The minor Devi are beneath you, the Merev are beneath the minor gods, and your Hakoi are beneath the Merev. Beneath the Hakoi are the plants and animals of Paris. But sometimes your Hakoi forget their place and must be reminded. The great hall was silent. I held my breath, praying she wouldn't probe me again. A pretty explanation, Mareva Tehi, but my Hakoi know their place. It is you who do not know yours. You are the only Merev in Kara to have more Devi blood in your veins than Hakoi, but that does not change your station, nor can you rise above it. Your privileges to freely move about Uruk without temple authorization, to participate in the gods' festivals and games, to travel most anywhere in Kara, are the same as any of your brothers and sisters. And it is the Morev who attend my Hakoi. As a healer, you are not too good to minister to their needs, and you are surely not too good to celebrate Ora Namtar with them. I swallowed. Yes, most holy one. Look at me. I raised my head. My grandmother's expression was fierce. And that is why you let the time get away from you, as you say. You, Morevetehi, my acolyte of love, are a bigot. I might understand if you were still a child, but you are not. You have done nothing to better yourself since then. Your bigotry is the reason you did not celebrate Ora Namtar. You did not want to share your body with our Hakoi. She glared as if daring me to contradict her. I stared into her golden eyes, wanting to deny her accusation, but that would be a lie. I kept quiet. She leaned forward. I have overlooked many of your transgressions while in my service. I know you use your psi power to harass other Morevs for what you perceive as slights, but I cannot overlook your bigotry or your missing Ora Namtar. However, I will not execute you because you are too dear to my heart. The stewardship for Astereth 69 in the Syrian Territory ends in 2 days. You will take the next rotation. My heart froze. This was my punishment? Getting exiled to Syrian? Everyone knew the Syrian Territory in Paris's far northern hemisphere was the worst place in the world to steward a landing beacon. Cold and dark, with dense woods full of wild animals, the Syrian was no place for me. My place was in Kara, a sunny desert south of the planet's equator where the fauna was kept in special habitats for learning and entertainment. As for the Syrianese, they were the descendants of one of the Devi's earliest and failed Hakoi spawning and breeding experiments and were as untamed as the territory where they lived. My throat tightened and a tear formed in the corner of my eye. Aresh, he's in the Syrian territory now. I'll be taking his place. It's already been a year since I've seen him, and now I won't see him for another year. 2 years without my best friend, my only friend. What am I to do? I managed to get up the gumption to protest, but didn't. Challenging my grandmother was disrespectful, and my punishment for that would be even worse than exile. It would also be futile. Asterisk's word was law, and it had just come down on my head. Yes, most holy one, I said, my voice meek. She leaned back on her throne. Mehmed will come to your room after breakfast tomorrow so you can be fitted for your uniform. My uniform, most holy one? I will not be taking my clothes? No. As overseer of the landing beacon, you are the liaison between the Mayor village as well as the commander of the garrison. Your subordinate, Captain Yos, will report to you once in Marin, and you are to relay the garrison's needs to Laird Tegger, the Mioran village chief. Yes, most holy one. I will make allowance for your healer's kit and a portable laboratory, but you are not to take your red fever research. I am sure you have other projects you can work on while you are there. But no, Mareva Tehi, it is too dangerous. I can take precautions. No, I will not allow you to endanger the Miorans. That is my final word. She gazed at me for a long moment. You should also know that they, like all Syrenes, are not a forgiving people. They do not take transgressions of any kind lightly. I swallowed. I understand, most holy one. Good. Her eyes narrowed. One more thing. As a garrison's Moreva, you will lead the services in worship of me, and that includes over sin. Go now. Thank you, most holy one. I stood on shaky legs, bowed, backed out of the great hall. Fleeing to my room, I fell on the bed and sobbed. It was bad enough to be exiled to Syrian territory and to spend another year without a resh, but Orison with a garrison? Only the Hakoi served in Astereth's military. I felt dirty already, and not allowing me to work on my red fever project was punishment by itself. A hand touched my shoulder. Tehi, what's wrong? A worried voice said. It was Moreva Halita, one of my friendlier Morev sisters. I'm being sent to the Syrian territory to steward Asterisk 69, I wailed. But why? I sat up. I missed Oranamtar yesterday, and now Asterith is punishing me. She gave me an unsympathetic look. You're lucky she didn't have your head. Be thankful you're her favorite. I sniffed but said nothing. Halita patted my shoulder. It won't be so bad, Tehi. The year will be over before you know it. Come on, it's time to eat.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Inside the Minds of Authors. Today we have the amazing Miss Roxanne with us. Hi, Madam. How are you?
I'm just fine. How are you?
I am doing lovely. I'm so happy you have joined us on the show.
Me
So,
too.
we're going to get started. So, we have a science fiction romance, which is all sorts of thrilling. The opening is exciting. Let's jump in. Tell us, what is this story about? Where did it come from?
Well, what it is, like all of my books, it examines one of the scourges of our society, which of course is bigotry. It is the story of this young priestess's or Moreva, her journey from being a bigot, her hatred eating her soul, to a being of love and light through her romance with a man, a Hokoi, of the race she despises. Well, we can put it this way. I mean, it's just her fight to reclaim her soul. And she discovers through her efforts that the Hakoi are people and that they deserve to be treated as such. Now, of course, that directly mirrors what's going on in America today. I think we have witnessed several instances of murderous bigotry over the past year. The death of George Floyd, other Black men being shot in the back, Black men being killed by the police because of a perceived threat when the video showed that there was no threat at all. That is essentially what this book is about, and how we can overcome our bigotry and learn to treat people as people. So, although it's a science fiction romance, at its core, it's about something much deeper. And in fact, the romance is the vehicle by which she discovers her true self.
It is very interesting that your main character is not sweet or innocent. It's not all good. She is the flaw one in this situation, which is very rare when we see in main characters. How did you decide to take this twist on your heroine?
I'm a pantser. That is, I write by the seat of my pants. I don't plot, I don't outline or anything like. And I started writing and I realized she was flawed. Let's just say, I would say another word, but this might be a family show. I wondered because she isn't likable. She's not, I won't say she's nasty, but she just isn't likable. She's unlikable. And I wondered how a reader would take that, where the heroine is usually maybe not all sweetness and light, but she's a good woman. And here we have someone who's basically I mean, I guess the one thing I could say about Moreva Tehi is that she's not evil. What I did, I just went on with it. And I said, well, let's see where this goes. And of course, in the course of the story, in the course of her romance, I realized that, this is the way to start because we're looking at this character's growth, not just, oh, she falls in love and, whatever. We're looking at her growing into a real person instead of this narrow minded, closed world seed, if you will, and how she grows into a healthy plant. That's why I started with it. I started with, an unlikable heroine. And hopefully by the end, readers will say, oh, she's a good person after all. She just needed to be thrust out of her shell. And she needed to learn about the wider world. Because the one thing about her life in the temple is that it's cloistered. She really knows nothing of the world outside the temple and outside her religion. Because as a priestess, even if she goes out on the street, she is given the respect, according to someone of her station. She doesn't know a world where she would be disrespected. She doesn't know a world where people don't care about her gods. And so she's thrust into that situation and she has to learn how to deal.
And like the fact that, yes, just by the short reading you gave us, she's a little selfish. She's a little very self centered in terms of how her mind functions and how she sees other people. But I like the fact that she is very much secluded. And I think that happens when you put any person in a bubble. Their expand of what they know, it only goes as far as that bubble. And she never had to push outside of that bubble. So it's interesting to see taking a person from that perspective and then taking them on a journey. Like, you're safe, you're secure, you're the favorite, and today we're going to send you away. I like the grandmother's conversation of like, okay, you think you're better than them, but you're the least of my people. It's like, ooh, that was raw.
Yes.
The interesting thing is, she didn't take it as an insult. Like, she should let that ride. Like, she didn't even acknowledge that. I was like, huh, okay.
Well, her grandmother is the Devi goddess of love. I will say it doesn't come out in the book, but her grandmother had never spoken to her like that. She was mothered by her grandmother when she was a baby, rather than taking her to letting the neonatal androids take care of her. Her grandmother did. She mothered her, she changed her diapers, fed her, comforted her when she cried. The fact that she doesn't say anything, it's an illustration of their relationship of really parent to child. And, she would never say anything against her grandmother, aside from the punishment aspect, but she would never say anything against her grandmother. I mean, her grandmother's everything to her. So, yes, she sat there and took it and tried to think of ways to, like, well, yeah, I really do feel that way, grandma, but let me see, what can I tell you? That isn't a lie. She is a complex character. The complexity actually introduced in those first few pages, but of course we expand on it, as we go along. She's not a one-dimensional bigot. She does have feelings. Right now they're wrong-headed, but she does have feelings. And the other thing is that she is not so stubborn, that her mind cannot be opened. It's just that no one has ever tried to open her mind because she lives this cloistered life. And like I said, when she's thrust into the real world, she has no choice but to deal with it in one way or another. And of course, how she deals with it is the book.
How hard was it to get inside her mind and bring her to life?
It really wasn't. And I say that because having been subjected to bigotry all my life, I just kind of thought to my past experiences and pretty much tried to put myself in their heads. The people who called me names, the people who hired me for a job because I was a twofer, black and female. Tried to put myself in their heads. And then I wrote the character. I should clarify that I put myself in their heads as much as I could. And I wrote the character. I guess you would say I'm pretty observant of people. I'm pretty good at reading body language. Because of that, depending on the situation, of course, but it's fairly easy to tell what people are thinking, even though they believe they've shielded themselves. Well, they haven't. And that's how, I say I can kind of get into their heads because I know what they're thinking. I know what they're thinking about me. I wrote Moreva Tehi as one of those people, an amalgam of a bunch of people, but one of those people, one of the bigots.
I like the style that you're looking at it and changing the perspective and changing the hero's journey. Because at the end of the day, your main character is eventually going to be a hero. That's what we want them all to become. You want them to fall in love and kind of find that own course. Do you think readers are going to be able to connect with her? That's the catch, because she can be kind of harsh. Can they connect with this child that's trying to find herself?
You know what? That's a really good question. I honestly don't know. Like we just spoke about, when you have an unlikable character, and especially since this is a romance, you have an unlikable character, and even though you see how she develops through the book, it depends on whether the reader is going to stick with it. I really can't say. Now, if they don't like the character in the beginning, and let's be honest, they're not really supposed to. I'm hoping that my world building will keep them intrigued.
How long did it take you to create this role? Because it's very detailed.
Not too long. One of the things, as like I mentioned, I'm a pantser, and the way I write really is, I think about a story and I think about its theme, where I want it to go. And what I end up with is an outline, if you will, in my head from I want to get from point A to point B to point C. Now, how I get there is anybody's guess. We just start writing and see what happens. The thing is that I think in pictures. I was amazed to find out that some people don't. It's like, what? You don't? What happens is I basically watch the movie in my head. I write down what I see for the world building. For example, the I imagine that the village of Muir, where she's going, is a walled village. It's, surrounded by 100-foot stone walls. I just described it. I just described what I saw in my head. Now, I will say the downside to that is that you can be overly descriptive. You bog the reader down in details. What's important is to be able to keep the gist of what you're looking at, but not be so overly descriptive that, it's like, okay, where's the story? That's kind of, I will say, a little difficult for me sometimes to not go into like excruciating detail about a place, a room, or something like that. What I do though is I don't, what I've learned, I guess I should say, is I don't have to describe every room in the castle. I only describe important ones. For example, the village, I describe the temple in her tower where she will live. I describe her bedroom or her little apartment. And I describe the control room for the tower. I describe the places where she is going to be the most often when most of the action takes place. Another one of those places is the lab where she's working on her cure for red fever. Other than that, just basic descriptions. She's in the woods, that kind of thing. One thing that I allow myself is to describe where most of the action takes place because those rooms and what's in them are going to be important. So, and they're going to figure throughout the book over and over again. So it seems to me that the reader would need to have an understanding what these places look like.
I like it. It works really well, and you set a picture in their minds as well of what to expect and where she's navigating through. Is this a series or is this a standalone book? What are you envisioning for?
That's a really good question, too. I'm calling it the Paris Archives, and this is book one. The second book, which I'm working on now, is called When Gods Die. And it picks up about 3 years after the Moreva of Astor. What I'm wondering about and thinking about is where do I want to take it after Where Gods Die? Do I want to have a series that just features Tehi and her lover, or actually by then it's her husband? Or do I want to do more of books focusing on other characters that appear in the Moreva Vastra? So I haven't quite decided how I want to progress with the series. Personally, I think it would be more interesting if we looked at some of the other characters, at some point. I think it would end up being kind of boring if we just focused on Tehi and her husband all the time, because how much trouble can they get into, especially after they're married? But I don't know how I'm going to work it, but I do have like an epilogue to Tehi and her husband. She's dying. She's an old woman and she's dying. She outlives him by 300 years and she never remarried. So, all of these people are standing around her deathbed. She's like, I don't know who most of them are. They're all her descendants. They're just people. I mean, just, ugh. She's like, who are you? And so she eventually dies. And of course, her grandmother's there, but she eventually dies. And Tegar appears, that's her husband, appears to her in her moments of death and says it's time to go. And so they walk into forever together. That would be the epilogue of this part of the saga. The Paris Archives are not only series that I'm writing. I'm writing another called the Underground series. The starting point is my book, The Underground, and that was the first book I'd ever written. So I'm working on the third book now. I don't know if I can do this, two books at once. I might drive myself crazy. So I'm working on the third book. And of course, there are lots and lots of other books in the pipeline. One, I think I might start it after I finish the third book and When Gods Die. It's about a woman, an African woman, who is abducted from her village. The year is about 1720. She's thrown on a slave ship. Her grandmother appears to her in the hold. Her grandmother says, and I should say her grandmother disappeared 20 years before. So her grandmother appears in the hold and says to her, I can save you, but you must trust me. And of course, the woman says yes. And she wakes up in her grandmother's arms to find out that A, she's a vampire, and B, she is now part of a band of space pirates.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow, there's so much in that statement. I'm like, "Say what? What just happened?"
I know. Actually, the Moreva of Astor is probably the most mainstream of all my books. I mean, the underground, it revolves around four characters, but within the underground, a werewolf falls in love with a space alien. Yeah,
There's a lot in so many different ways it goes. I'm like, "Oh, I did not see that coming," but
yeah,
okay.
yeah. And it's interesting because people really either love the underground or they hate it. And there seems to be very little in between. And I think that's because people who are open minded enough and willing to suspend disbelief enough so that they could see a werewolf and a space alien falling in love, those are the people who really, really enjoy it. When I started writing, I mean, I actually started writing a long time ago. But one of the reasons why I started was that I was getting bored. All of the stories were starting to sound like urban fantasy, fantasy. You could almost tell what was going to happen, who was going to die, who wasn't, that sort of thing. And so I said, well, I'm going to write. I'm going to write some stuff. I'm going to write what I want to write. I was amazed at how many people, this was back then. I mean, this was a long time ago, but I was amazed at how many people told me that you can't mix science fiction and fantasy. They will never mix. And I'm like, well, I've already done it. And when I tell people like what the underground was, they'd laugh. It's like, oh, that's just too crazy. I started my own publishing company to publish my books. And the reason I did that is I did the shopping around. I shopped the underground around for about 4 years, and there were no takers. And I was at a one of the writers organizations I belong to. I was at their yearly meeting and I was sitting at a table with this like seriously big shot agent. Asked for her advice. I told her about my book and she said, well, the reason why you're not getting any takers is because no one knows how to sell it. Is it a science fiction? Is it an urban fantasy? Because it can't be pigeonholed, nobody's going to take it. She said, why don't you write another book? And I said, no, I'm going to start my own publishing company and I'm going to publish this.
That's the beautiful thing about it is now you have options and you don't have to be pigeonholed and you can write things that make you happy that readers can connect.
Exactly, exactly. I have my issues with like Amazon and so on and so forth. But one thing you cannot deny is that when they started this self publishing platform, it opened the world up to indie authors. Granted, at first, people just published anything and threw up all kinds of crap. But now it's become, a lot more professional. Indie authors are finding success. It's just been amazing. And there's also, I think, so much more choice out there than what the big four now would publish, by themselves. I think indies are coming into their own as an alternative source of great writing, especially books that the big four wouldn't publish for whatever reason. This is our chance to shine. And I'm so happy to see that so many authors of color are jumping on it. It's just wonderful. I have to say, thank you, Amazon, for giving me my chance.
They revolutionized the game to a degree nobody was expecting. And when they said you can publish a book and do it for free and you can do what you want and here's a platform, it is still a business. Let's be honest. Amazon is still a business and they're still within a business mind frame and they do an amazing job at taking care of their customers.
Hmm.
Their business partners, we might be a little bit, but like
Hmm.
you said, I love Amazon. I love them as a customer and I appreciate those opportunities that they give people that nobody else would. So,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Exactly. Exactly.
What advice would you give an up and coming author?
First thing is after you've written your manuscript, after you've finished your draft, have it edited. And I don't mean just spelling and grammar. Take it to a developmental editor, or if you can't, because they can get pricey. If you can't afford that, get your beta readers together. Beta readers are those who read your manuscript and tell you, like, well, I think you have a plot hole over here. This doesn't fit with what's going to happen later in the book. The beta readers tell you where your issues are. And beta readers they can be your friends, they can be your family. There are actually groups now on, I guess, Goodreads and Facebook of beta readers. It's like, we will read your book. This is our interest. If your book fits this, we will read it. You have to make sure when you want to publish, you have to make sure your manuscript is polished and ready for publishing. One of the complaints about indie writers was that put any old crap up on Amazon and expect it to sell and so on and so forth. Just because you have a good story does not translate into a good book. That comes with polishing, polishing, polishing. So that's the first piece of advice I'd give an up and coming author. The second piece of advice is make sure you have a good cover design. Unfortunately, people do judge a book by its cover. If you have what looks like an amateurish cover, they will not pick it up. They won't. Your back cover blurb and all that kind of stuff has to be good. Either you learn to do that yourself, or there are outfits, businesses out there who will do that for you. They're not necessarily cheap. So definitely learn to do it yourself. That's the cheaper way. But it's all about packaging, it's all about product. Your book as an indie author has to be indistinguishable or better than anything the big publishers put out, because that's the only way you're going to get noticed. That's the only way you're going to get. So this does not mean, perfection, because I've never even seen perfection's taillights, but it means the best book you can make it. Join writers groups, get feedback, plenty of writers groups where you can exchange ideas, talk to people, bounce your ideas off of them. That's what it's all about, communication. And in fact, that's what we do, right? We're writers, we communicate. You need to communicate with other authors, network. Don't think you're writing in a vacuum. Just because I sit alone here in my office, I'm typing like a mad woman, that doesn't mean I'm alone. That just means I'm sitting in my office like a mad woman typing. I have a network of authors that I correspond with regularly. Email is a wonderful thing. I go to conventions. So, well, of course, not this year, but I go to conventions and network with authors there. Go to conventions also to sell my books. These are science fiction, fantasy, horror conventions, I guess I should clarify. Like I said, you got to network. I mean, you're not in this alone. Don't think you can make it all by yourself, because you won't. You need people. The final thing I'd say is marketing. You have to learn how to do at least basic marketing. That's something I did not do for years. I know why. I mean, I can be very shy about putting myself out there and talking about my books and so on. Well, I don't like it. But I guess that's why. I mean, in fact, I hate it. But it's something you have to do. It's something you have to do. You have to promote. And like I said, I don't like it because it still feels kind of sleazy to me to promote my own book. I mean, this is a personal problem, okay? It's something that's absolutely necessary, because if you don't market your book, nobody's going to know it's out there. I've taken some marketing courses. I've learned how to, approach people for reviews. I've learned how to approach people for podcasts and things like that. I'm getting
You
there.
are
Yeah.
running a business, so you have to do that
Well,
part. It is a
that's
business.
just it. And that's just it. What I had to do was really get my head around the fact that Black Rose Press, that's my publishing house, is a business. And its business is selling my books.
Absolutely. I try to explain to a lot of people is our world is very much divided into three parts. You have the arts, you have the craft, and then you have the business, and you can't separate them.
Right. You
So
absolutely cannot. You can't be a success in one without doing the others. And that's all there is to it. That's all there is to it. And as much as I hate to say it, because I don't want to do it, that's the truth. You can pay people to help you with marketing. There's nothing wrong with that.
well, madam, we're going to switch gears and we're getting ready to start our lightning round. These are fun, easy. Don't think too much about it. We're going to go right into them, whatever comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. Apple cider or hot chocolate?
Apple cider.
Nice. Sweet or spicy?
Spicy.
Okay. Beach or mountain?
Oh man, no, That is an unfair question.
Oh, yeah. You got to pick one.
Oh, gosh. Beach.
It's a tough one, I know. So let's see. Marvel or DC?
Marvel.
Nice. So these ones get a little bit more tricky. If your current book had a theme song, what would it be?
Oh my goodness. I Will Survive.
Woo, good one. Here's your last one. If you can pick any character in a movie that best fits your personality, who would it be?
Hmm. I would say Professor Strangelove or Dr. Strangelove, actually. That was the character's name. Dr. Strangelove or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb.
Nice job.
I think it was Stanley Kubrick's first film.
So, Madame, where can our listeners find you? Where can we get your books?
Well, you can get my books at every major outlet, Amazon, of course, Barnes and Noble, Kobo, Apple. The only place you can't get it is Google Play. I have my website, www.roxannebland.rocks. And you can email me at roxannebland.rocks.
Awesome, awesome. Madame, it has been such a pleasure to have you with us today. Do you have any closing remarks for us?
I think I would say, as a reader, even if you have your favorite genres, take a chance. Read something outside of your comfort zone. You might find that in doing so, you've discovered a whole new set of worlds that you never would have imagined.
That is beautiful. I totally agree. And our listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. Ms. Roxanne, it's been a pleasure to have you. I'm so excited about your very unique take on every genre. It is a mash of fantasy and power and beauty. I'm excited. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead, give this podcast a like, share it, invite your friends, and we will see you next week for another exciting author. Thank you, everyone.